Hello. Okay, let's find Tom today. Oh, he's here. Hello. Oh, I can't hear your voice. Oh no, I think it's you're here now.
Good. Is it working out?
Yes. There was a
Magic.
delay. So thank you for joining me today, Tom, for a chat. Can I
Very
just
welcome.
ask, first of all, is Woodfin your just a really cool last name, or is it something you made up?
No. Yeah, it is my
Is
last name. It's my family name.
it?
Yeah.
Such a cool name. You're the first Woodfin I've ever met, so
Yeah,
very
yeah.
cool.
There's not so many of us around. I think there's a few in America and I guess a couple in England. But yeah, I found out the other day that it meant the people who live at the end of the woods, like the where the woods finish.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
Ah, so you're of kind of between.
Yeah, exactly. Like constantly searching the world for the edge of forests to try to live.
Hmm, that is interesting.
Mm.
So I have invited you on just because, well, I've been studying with you for quite a few months and you've played a big part in my own journey last year. And I'm starting to discover that the people that I feel most inspired by seem to be the most humble people that I meet. So I don't know if there's something in there. And that the more that I kind of find out about you, I can see that it's almost like shining a mirror. There's some similarities there in how you like to work and,
Mm.
using a multidiscipline approach to almost create like neural ruptures.
Mm.
So to offer people new ways of being and experiencing in this human realm that we find ourselves in. Um, so yeah, I'm just very intrigued. I love to connect with people and hear their stories and how we arrived here because we've all got a unique story, and I think it helps other people resonate and connect so we can see that there's always like these doorways and pathways for yeah, just those new ways of being. So would you like to share how did you land here? Because
Yeah.
you've got such a wealth of experience and knowledge, and it just I'm in awe because we've been studying such complex concepts over the last few months. You've been basically allowing me to digest them. So you just
Mm.
have a unique brain that you can really take these subjects and be able to kind of pass them on in ways that people can really, yeah, embody. So
Mm.
how did you arrive?
Oh, it's a long story.
Mm.
Thank you first of all for inviting me to do this as well, and for the kind words. You know, I think last year was a very big year. Anyway, I ended up learning a lot, and I think there's a few drivers I have to, um, I guess, like give credit to a sense of perfectionism that drove me to want to try to understand. I think the stuff that Pi was talking about was the guy who's leading the course. But I've always found that whenever there's like a kind of a nerd subject like this, which I feel like is mine, I do tend to get a little bit obsessive about it, and then I'm always trying to like talk about it to people and like mouth off about it, with varying degrees of success. But to try to make it digestible and communicable, I think is something that um, really speaks to me. And I think thinking in symbols as well helped me a lot last year because I really got to see as we were going deep into these different like the sciences and the psychology and stuff like that, being able to hang a lot of different concepts off certain symbols. Like symbols really brought the thing to life. It was like, oh, I see how that fits together visually as like a kind of a picture. And I think because I think more in pictures, or tend to think a lot in pictures at least, that was really helpful. But how did I arrive here? to be doing that in the first place. I think, I don't know, I guess luck in some ways, but and curiosity and following where it led. I think coming from I grew up in North Yorkshire, so that was was its own experience. But I think I could always feel living there that it wasn't going to be quite enough for me. Like I has always had this kind of explorer bent, I think, and this inclination to want to understand things and want to like get out into the world and see what the hell was going on and enjoy experiences and things like that. So I think that really, like that initial drive, I knew that from such a young age, and then as soon as I did have some funds and the capacity to do it, I set off to go on this kind of round the world mission. And then my friend and I set off after coming back to the UK for about a year and trying to go to uni and just figuring that this wasn't really for me. Like I wasn't feeling inspired. I was eager to do things, but that wasn't the track specifically for me that felt appropriate. So with my friend, we went out to the Philippines at age, I think 20 we were, and we'd gone out there to start like a new life. And our original idea, it's kind of funny in reflection now, but we thought we were going to be professional gamblers. And so we had this idea but we were taking it seriously. We were studying systems and looking at all of these different ways to find arbitrage within the systems and things like that. And this was our plan. We set up a little home office in the Philippines and went to work on the spreadsheets. And the plan was always to try to establish some kind of passive income stream that would allow us to do other things and entertain different projects and ideas. I could feel like that wasn't specifically my passion, working with spreadsheets and numbers necessarily. I was very, very much into ideas and understanding how the world fit together. And then from that, there was a few more ventures and businesses in between, but I started to get attracted to mixed martial arts. And so I started training in Philippine kickboxing and wrestling, and then started competing there in the Philippines, and was starting to kind of rise in a small way, but in a kind of a prominence within at least the Philippine system. And I could really, it felt like a lot of the earlier drives for me was this sense of I feel somehow kind of empty in the middle, or numb, or dissociated. Like I know there's a lot of kind of extraordinary things happening around me and to me and all of that, but I wasn't really there for it. I didn't really feel associated and in it and to be present with it. It was almost always like I was looking for something else to do that could get me a new feeling of power maybe, or of success or something like that. From there, I remember having this one fight there in the Philippines, and it was like a main event, and it was a really powerful match, because it was like I don't know, it was archetypally it was like a hero story type thing, and the guy I was fighting was bigger than me and was hairier, and I was like kind of the hero, at least in my own mind. And I remember beating him in the first round with like quite a brutal knockout. And I remember him like hitting the canvas and like getting stretched out, and remember feeling this immense sense of elation. Like this is just this really incredible feeling of like how maybe powerful I could be physically, which had always been a big thing. I never like really grew up that tough, but I think that was something that I needed to at least establish or complete somehow in myself. There's some part of me that was searching for that at least. But the funniest thing was, I remember at the time, there's this little voice inside of me that said, like, this is the peak, like, this is as good as it gets. It was like a very quiet, annoying, intuitive voice that I tried to push down and suppress. And I remember it, like the elation lasted maybe 15 minutes, and then the adrenaline wore off, and then the pain kicked in. And then I remembered waking up the next day and thinking like, is that it? You know, that was all of that training for such a short little high. It just didn't seem kind of worth it. But because I'm quite stubborn, I didn't really heed that call for a while and carried on doing what I was doing and tried to like suppress this growing disillusionment, I think, with that particular field. And in the end, felt like I was doing it more for the money and more because other people were excited to see me do it rather than because I actually felt it in myself. Then I moved to Thailand with my friend, and we were starting to get into more personal development type stuff. And so I met my very close friend, Sebastian. We're still friends to this day. He's one of my best friends, but he's introduced me to EFT tapping. And he works with people with social anxiety specifically. But before that fight, he'd given me some introduction to EFT and took me through some sessions. And the other, I suppose, like the noteworthy thing about that fight was I remember stepping into the ring and not feeling nervous. Usually I would feel nervous, like I was scared of this thing. So that's why I felt like I had to kind of try to understand it and complete it and do it.
Yeah.
But I remember stepping into the ring on that time and not feeling nervous, and then thinking that was a really powerful testimony for EFT tapping.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what.
For people who don't know what EFT tapping is, could you give us like a little bit of a summarization?
EFT tapping is based on the Chinese medicine system. It's based on a kind of like a acupressure. So most people have probably heard of acupuncture, but it's acupressure. So you stimulate certain meridian junctions on the body, like certain parts of the body where there's meridian junctions, and those are linked to specific organs in the body where the emotions are held according to Chinese medicine. So you basically, it's like a process of slowing down and completing thought. So, you know, often people will have these loops in their mind where they're just thinking a thing, but the thinking of it is kind of avoiding the feeling of it. So EFT makes the thought conscious, and you tap on these places in the body while you're saying the things out loud, just making them conscious, slowing them down so you can start to actually feel and follow and complete the thought, or take it to its completion in a somatic sense, like in a feeling sense. And you explore it, like you explore the terrain of your subconscious. It's like, what are all these unconscious sounds that this feeling wants to make? You know, we say sounds, but it's like words. It's sequences of sounds strung together in the form of words. And it's like those words are the things that are structuring your experience, and in a way kind of filtering it back to cycle you into it. It's like how you filter your experience through these ideas and beliefs and thoughts is going to create autonomic reactions within you that are like going to create the physical experience of it. So this is why I've become really fascinated with like the interplay between words and the autonomic nervous system, and how the body can influence the brain, and how the brain can influence the body, and how it's really just, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but it's one system.
Yeah.
You know, we only separate it out conceptually, but that was really fascinating to have my first glimpse into, I could change things, you know, where I felt like this particular reaction. I didn't have the language for it back then, but essentially this particular feeling experience linked to this particular sequence of events, I can change that. Like I can actually like release the emotional charge and start to work through the unconscious ideas that are structuring it and holding it in place. And that really started me on the track towards what I'm more interested in the psychology side and like the personal development. And it's still along the lines because I want to be successful and great and amazing and try to fill the gap of whatever it is. And if I can get enough external success, then that'll be great. I'll be happy forever. That was kind of my kind of driving delusion, I suppose.
Yeah.
But we started to explore more and more of these modalities and got into NLP, and eventually met this guy who was doing breath work. This was back in 2011 in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and he was doing breath work with a deep tissue body work massage at the same time. So I really didn't know what these things were anyway, but I took a session with him and did the breath work, which was very intense. It was a combination of rebirthing and breath of fire for like an hour and a half continuously. So it's more like, you can imagine holotropic breath work whilst getting a deep tissue body work massage at the same time. Super, super intense.
Yeah.
But because I still had very much a kind of a fighter's mentality. I was like, I'm going to tough it out and I'm going to win this meditation, like whatever that meant to me at the time. But like I needed it because I was like, my body was so tense and tight from the years of training, and I was not interested in stretching at that point. But my body was so tense and tight from that. I just ended up quite contorted and sweating and screaming and crying and shaking and all of this really, really intense experience. And then at the end of it, had what I can only really describe as like a full out of body type experience, where I remember looking down on the earth and this kind of shimmering gold light everywhere and feeling this intense sense of love and unity. And it's like I was everything. Like I was all information everywhere across. It was like everything seemed so obvious in that place. Like it was a really, like a kind of like a religious experience without any religious framework to put it in. So
and was this your first breathwork session?
First, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, and I, it was difficult to talk to people about back then because there's obviously a lot of skepticism and cynicism, and fair enough, I think people, I didn't even really have a framework to put it in myself. It's like I don't know what to do with this now. I wasn't practicing as a monk or anything like that. It's just it was there, and it really started to unravel my life after that. Like I really just was very disillusioned with like, what am I doing? Where am I going? What do I need to do? What should I do? So I went back to the UK. I had 3 more fights in the UK in the space of about 5 weeks. This was like my last brutalist attempt to like try to make some money. And then my idea was I was going to go to Chile for some reason. I don't know. I was just like kind of an adventurer at that stage and really up for doing weird stuff. So I lost 2 of the fights, and I didn't make the money that I thought I was going to make. And I had a friend who I'd worked with in the Philippines who said, "Oh, my friend's building mud houses in the Philippines." And I'd been doing started to get into like bamboo architecture in Thailand and like building these bamboo yoga shala type things, and I'd really started. That had already begun the process of me feeling good about building on the land and doing this kind of thing, and I was interested in like ecological building and stuff like that. And I had this little intuitive yes, that go that way, and that obviously took me to Pai's eco village Maya, and that was I went there to build the mud houses, and I remember meeting Pai for the first time and saying something along the lines of, it's great to build mud houses. If you want to stay here, we want you to do the innerdance training. Yeah.
So did you know anything about innerdance at that point?
I just thought it was some kind of fluffy little spiritual thing on the side. It's like, it's not really for me. I'll do the house building stuff. And that was really, I wasn't up for it. And it took a little bit of convincing, but in the end I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And I remember there was something that first week we did like 2 inner dances a day for 7 days, and in the middle it was like just a full day of like Pai theory type stuff, which you'll be aware of is like quite a phenomenon in itself. And I remember just that whole week having this series of like very lucid dreams, and like seeing these shapes and colors that just felt really familiar. Like I didn't really know what they were, but it was like that's more familiar than anything else I've ever seen. Very, very fascinating experience. And what was even more interesting to me before that was when I was back in the UK, I'd started to mix music together and I would just meditate. I started to meditate. I don't even know where I really got that from. I thought it was like some way to better myself, you know. And so I just started to meditate, and then I started to mix music to meditate to. So I was sitting there and I would meditate in my house. This was back in the UK in that 6-month period, and then I would kind of fall asleep and have this, and then wake up in a lucid dream type thing. And so, you know, going to the Philippines after that, it really started to make sense that this is, yeah, I kind of, something in me knew already I was preparing for this. It was a really next logical step, even though I wasn't aware. I thought I was going to build mud houses, but there was I don't know, it felt very, very in tune with what was going on anyway, within my body. So
there's a little bit of retrocausality happening there.
yeah, like I couldn't have known that consciously necessarily, but I did have that little intuitive, yeah, that's the way. And then arrived there and looked back and was like, actually, I've been kind of preparing for this, but not really knowing about it.
Yeah.
So that was good. And then I spent 6 months there in the jungle, just kind of unraveling and doing these inner dances. And then I was like, right, go out now to Taiwan and Singapore and Malaysia. And I'd started to develop this kind of hybrid boxing, emotional release, gestalt type therapy thing where people would do breath work and they would box and they would kind of end up doing this kind of cathartic screaming. This was back in 2012, I think, before Instagram was even invented. I see a lot of people like doing the cathartic screaming thing now there, but this was like we would look each other in the eyes, and I would let them project onto me some issue, and then they would fight and fight and fight and fight and fight, and just box, and they would breathe in rhythm as well, and you could just see them, feel them getting built up and built up and built up, and then usually at the end they would like release some kind of anger or frustration. Yeah, something like that. And then there would be this, I don't know, there would be a connection to that thing which would help it in some way, like move through them or like bridge to a new kind of awareness of something, or at least some relief within them.
Yeah.
It wasn't, it wasn't like particularly well structured, I don't think, but it just came very intuitively, like this is what feels like is needed, and a combination of the skills and the things that I can bring. So I was really into that.
That's kind of where the sort of multidiscipline approach was kind of birthed from, because I can see that how that approach, it really ties in like the mind, the body, the emotions, and it's such a, well, I actually, me and my girls, we started MMA and boxing last year, so I can just like, and I did do a little bit of sparring, which I had such fear going into that, just safety, like feeling safe. But wow, like once you kind of take yourself into these spaces where you don't think you can go, it just starts to change things, and then you can see how it does tie in with the emotional body as well, because you have to be disciplined enough and have that not so much sense of control, but just be able to witness what's happening without sort of reacting to it, because we're not there to hurt people either. Well, I wasn't.
Depends on the space.
Depends, but
no, that's really powerful. I think you told me that actually last year, but I'd forgotten that. So again, just well done for doing that, because that's like, that was, for me, that was one of the places. I was scared of physical confrontation. Like I didn't like grow up a tough kid, I didn't think, but I grew up around tough kids that were tougher than me, and so physical confrontation had always been like a trigger point for me. And I remember the first time I sparred, and I got hit a couple of times. I was just frozen, like, what the hell do I do? And then it's like, yeah, you have to fight back. Right, okay. So they're just throwing these wild punches. But I think what's so useful about it is like you learn to mediate your energy and aggression in the midst of intensity. And you can always tell now when somebody comes into the gym for the first time, because they're either like frozen a bit like I was, or they're kind of all out, just 100% aggression. And learning to temper and go like 10, 20%, 30%, and just kind of ride the wave whilst experiencing the intensity, learning to get hit, learning to hit. It's like it's getting in touch with a very, very primal animal side that feels, I just feel like there's so many, like through embodied cognition, there's so many good metaphors that you can learn about the world and life through physical training. And this is, I think Pi even mentioned that in his book. Like exercise is just one of the really important things for being able to understand the physical world. And you know, I've since branched out into trainings in embodiment coaching, and have really started to embrace this idea of like, how can I use the body in different ways to expand my embodied knowledge of the world. And so one of the things in the last few years I was starting to get into was dancing, like partner dancing, because you have this relational combative thing. Okay, I know how to fight, I know how to be in a combative, relational, embodied place with somebody, but how about collaborate? And you are kind of collaborating when you're fighting as well, like you are. And yeah, like you say, when you get into a good gym, you're not really trying to hurt each other, but you are trying to find the edge of, I want to push this person and I want them to push me, so I can sharpen my awareness somehow and my efficacy in this physical arena. But then the partner dancing is a completely different energy. You know, you're not supposed to choke out your dance partners. It doesn't go down well.
No.
I didn't find that out firsthand. I already had that idea in my head. So it's like,
don't step on their toes either.
yeah, stepping on the toes to boot. But it's really fun. Like, it's really like, oh, this is a nice way to collaborate. And I had to go through like the beginning part was a whole uncomfortable, awkward wave of self-consciousness, because it's like I almost had to change identities. It's like, no, I'm a fighter. It's like, you can also be a dancer as well. I'm like, well, it's a bit soft. I had to go through a lot of that kind of deconstruction, I guess. But what I found is that being able to do the partner dancing stuff, I'm not great at it, but I'm still learning a lot. But it really improved my combat game, like my MMA game, especially jiu-jitsu, because you just learn to you learn to kind of roll with somebody, or like to roll with the waves and be smooth and not always need to use force, but how to actually be a bit more fluid with what you're doing. So there's so much I feel like we can learn from engaging in these different embodiments, but those two in particular, like how to relate to people in combat and in collaboration, feel like really good embodied metaphors.
And in both, you need to be able to connect with that person, be able to read them, because if not, you know, you're not going to be able to either lead them or you're going to get hit in the face.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that's really true. Very good point. It's like underneath all of it is connection. You know, even if you're trying to choke someone out or bash them in the head, it's like you need to be able to be present and aware and connect with what they're doing, so you can feel it. It's a very like an ancient martial art type approach to it. You know, when I first got into the MMA thing, it was more kind of like barbarian style, just force, but it didn't have all the trappings of this kind of the ancient martial arts, which is about connection and oneness and unity, and not doing things from a place from anger, and being able to temper and manage your own like autonomic energy levels. So yeah, and I think that started to come back now, as people's knowledge of, you know, it's not just fighting for fighting's sake, although having that kind of raw brute force, I think, is important and necessary for when it's needed, because if somebody else can overwhelm you with force, but if you can match them, then if you also have the, you know, the power and the connection between all of that, you're using your whole system, which is much more potent.
Yeah. It's like when you go into meditation, it's always like you need to have that balance of, you need the alertness, you need to have that stability to hold yourself, but then you also need to open up to everything. So you need that sort of
Yeah,
sense of ease, relaxation, softness as well. So
yeah.
we
I
can
think
hold it
that's
all.
it is, yeah, and I think that's what's been really useful about using the symbols as frameworks last year. So the symbol that came up a lot was the yin yang, like you saw in
Yeah.
the what would you call them, the sessions. Like the yin yang was used a lot, the Vesica Pisces, that crossover of the two circles, and then also the cross as well, the vertical axis and the horizontal axis representing. There's so many concepts that you can hang on those symbols, but the yin yang one was something that I really thought about a lot this last year because it's so potent. Yeah, like you say, the meditation thing. It's so interesting. I find myself doing I meditate a lot, and
Yeah.
around about 2013, after innerdance, I got into vipassana meditation, started to do
Right.
that for a while, but I still had the very competitive spirit with it. So the first vipassana I really went in to win, and um, I didn't get a prize at the end, and I did get taken down a few pegs. But
This is
see,
maybe why you're so humble now, though.
I've been embarrassed and humiliated so many times. It's like, okay, I'm not even going to try anymore. Um,
And it's
but
quite interesting, actually, that so you came into Vipassana after discovering inner dance.
yeah,
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 because I seem to be very pulled. Like, this is what I've been researching. I really want to go into Vipassana to treat myself. And then I didn't vocalize this to anyone. And then that night, actually, someone in my inner dance group was also saying the same thing. She just wants to go off and have a Vipassana retreat for 2 months.
mm,
So I don't know if there's a connection there, but it's interesting to hear these synchronicities coming through.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if it keeps showing up in the awareness, it's like once, okay, twice, and thrice. It's like, all right, somebody,
Yeah.
something from my unconscious is communicating via external reflections. Or my reticular activating system is attuned to these messages.
Mm,
But the reason I went to Vipassana is because there was another guy at the Eco Village who had done it, and I
okay.
was just like, if he can do it, I can definitely do it. I'm going to be better than that. So I still had I was very still competitive at the time, um, but I really remember coming out of the end. Have you ever done one before, Vipassana?
No, but I'm such a yap that I think it's for me, that would be the challenge to shut this.
Yeah,
So I think that's why I'm just feeling called. Like I just want to step into sort of my pain and discomfort a little bit. So how long did you go for your first one?
first one was ten
Okay.
days. Second one I think was 7 days. Then I did half of one in the Philippines because my visa ran out and I had to leave. Then I
Okay.
did another 10 day in Malaysia, and then we actually did one. We held a kind of a relaxed one in Switzerland.
Oh
Um,
wow.
I was living there for a little while, working on building this kind of retreat place with my friend Mukti, a Brazilian woman who also I met through innerdance and through Pi, and we
Oh, wow.
renovated this chalet, and then held a kind of a loose vipassana retreat with walking meditations in between. Afterwards, we did like an innerdance teacher training, so it was like a week of vipassana,
Oh
a week of
wow.
innerdance teacher training. It's bloody intense. It's now that I
Yeah,
think about it, but
that's a lot.
it's just the
But we're
way we
working
roll.
with language, so I
Yeah,
mean, it's all
yeah.
applicable.
Well, yeah. I mean, I but I think it's one of the things, I listen to music and I put together playlists, and I find the playlist creation side of things that's always something that has been kind of transformative in me in the same way that people who make art have a kind of a transformative experience. That's why they create, is to transmute things inside of them into something external
Mhm.
that can be recognized And yeah, just it's that whole transmutation process. And playlisting, I think, like is like that for me. In music, I just find it so interesting anyway, using music and sound, and obviously sound and words are only different conceptually. They like maybe land in different parts of the brain, but they're all from the same stem. It's all sound. And so I really learned to blur the line a little bit and to listen to language in a different way, like listening to language not so much as the narrative content of it, because that's the hypnotic part a lot of the time. Is the well, I mean, the toning and the pacing is also the hypnotic part, but what I mean is like the narrative content is the thing that people get stuck on, of like they believe the narrative content of the thoughts rather than tuning into the tone, the pace, the pitch, the tempo, the texture of the sounds that they're making. And if fundamentally you're a biology making sounds about your experience, like sounding out your experience, that are lodged within this kind of meaning matrix in the brain. So one of the things we looked at last year, if you remember, is the superordinate and subordinate categories of words and things like that. So we have this really complex meaning matrix, and that's kind of the map that we use to navigate. But we have this expression in NLP, like the map is not the territory. And it's like, okay, you get lost in the map of the conceptual world, but it's not the same as the real experience. But the map can kind of create the experience, because it's like the stained glass window that the light filters through, that then creates this color, this experience of color, or emotion, as it turns out in the body. So there's really, there's so much of my eyes have really been opened to, I guess, like the underlying reality and the substructure of the reality. And Vipassana was really huge for that, because there's nowhere to go. It's like, it's just you and the most annoying parts of you and the most like disagreeable parts of you, and they're all just there waiting for a little bit of quiet to come up and start to make themselves known. But what I found is it's really like, okay, it's a bit like going to the dentist in some respects. Like, it's not comfortable, but you go, and afterwards it's been really necessary. So you're kind of opening the gates for all of the feelings that you've, and ideas that are structuring those feelings that you've kind of inloaded, to just come back up again. And they all come out. And I always find it's like, so I went through some things in Vipassana. Like, there was one where I was just curled up on the floor of my cell in this like suicidal depression. It was the worst feeling. And I was going through a breakup at the time, so I obviously had drama within me. But just to feel that, and just thinking, I don't know how I'm going to go on if this is what life is. I just can't. And then within half an hour, that whole thing had just collapsed in on itself, and I was sat in the hall feeling this incredible bliss. And my eyes were closed, and these purple shimmering sensations up and down my body, and it was just this incredible experience of like, these are just bottlenecks. You turn your attention towards them and go through them, and they become like the cloud that just disperses. It's not comfortable while you're in them, but a lot of the discomfort is psychological, because a lot of the discomfort is what the meaning that you're assigning to it, and you have to deal with the meaning that you've assigned to it when it comes up. But if you have like a kind of a meta narrative and a meta meaning, you can just experience it as an experience without it needing to be quote unquote bad. You can experience the fear and have your body just completely, like, give your body to it completely. And when you do that, the effect is really transformative. I often find like there's something in the middle of that pain, that density, and like, it's often the really, really dense feelings. It's like you could imagine them as being a book with really small pages and like thousands and thousands of words on each page, and you have to like look to try to read. And it's like you look at this book and you think, there's just no way, I'm not interested. I want big letters, I want pictures, I want the simple, easy, flowy thing where I can just turn the pages at will. But when you start to like slow things down, and there is like a relationship between how you can fine tune your awareness to make it smaller, and that is what you focus on in Vipassana, is like making your awareness like more refined and finer tuned, so you can focus on your fingernail, and there's like a whole universe going on in your fingernail that you just won't have been aware of, because the broad strokes of the noisiness of life had just, there wasn't the sensitivity to it. But as you do that, you find your relationship with time changes, and time kind of distorts, because space and time have this kind of intersection that changes the way you experience things. So if you can access and tap into very, very small awareness, and then also these kind of meta, bigger awarenesses, and hold all of that together whilst you're having the experience, you're not as bound by the limitations of the narrative that you've constructed about the experience.
I think that's really interesting. I resonate with everything that you say. I had like such a profound spiritual awakening. It really was. It was I literally had an ego death very recently, actually. And we've been studying like these structures, like how much of a structure language is, and how attached we can become of our story. And it's almost like you think you do the work until you realize you haven't. And then basically during that experience, I realized how much of an anchor my voice and how language was for me. And it so much so that it was preventing me from letting go of all of the attachments that I have in this 3D realm. So that experience, then I basically language switched off in my brain, and I started speaking light language, because it had to go for me to be able to let go of control and attachments to this life. And then that's the moment that I went to 0 point. I went to the void, like consciousness. I went to the infinite, and I felt like I was away for an eternity in that space. And it's because it was so interesting, because I was like, I really struggled to let go of language, and this was like the whole structure. It was like that realization, wow, like this is the story that I'm attaching myself to, and I'm limiting myself because of the story that I'm invested in.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and because it is really uncomfortable. Like there is a real, you call it like
It was terrifying for me.
Say again.
It was terrifying for me. It was painful.
Yeah.
It was awful, but it had to happen for me to then have this perception realization on the other side now.
Yeah, I think we don't realize how much our identities are tied to the language that we've used to structure them with. And it's like I had something similar. I did DMT a while back, and I remember just feeling this terror kind of creeping in on me, and then thinking, okay, just hold on to a mantra like thank you, thank you, thank you. Just hold on to that, to like spin this energy of like appreciation, like to kind of open like a doorway to the awareness of appreciation, so I could experience it from appreciation. But then I kind of like fell beneath a place like where language didn't exist, like there wasn't language there, and it's like, I without thinking it, because I didn't have the language to think it, but it's like, what do I do now? Because even the words thank you had fallen away, because there wasn't language, and it was just pure experience, and this kind of angst and anxiety of experience, which was really difficult. And then on the other side, I came around and had like a headache and a nauseousness in my stomach, and the next day we did another one,
Mm-hmm.
which was the plant one, the plant DMT. They call it Changa, and it's like then that this gets weird, but I got to see the elves, the Terence McKenna's DMT elves, and they're doing some surgery on my stomach, and the message was just relax and lie down. You can't move anyway, but you have to. This is fine though. It's benevolent. It's okay. Don't worry. It's like okay, just kind of laid there with this terror, and then I came around at the end, and my headache had gone, my nauseousness had gone, and it was just like this experience of like things can change so quickly, but we don't necessarily want them to because there's a security in the structure. You know, there's a security in the story, and it's not because it's bad or wrong or anything. It's just like if you're overwhelmed by too much fear and you're not volunteering for it, the chances of you contracting back into I'm not ever going to do that ever again are very, very, very high. So being able to break down and titrate and interlace these feelings of like I guess relaxation, resourcefulness with feelings of fear, which I think is really what we did some of that in the coaching on Friday.
Yeah.
But it's looking at it through the innerdance philosophy's framework. It's like I've started to think a lot more like this recently. It's really cool. It's like you basically just engaging different parts of your brain. So you have one that engages when you feel fear, which sends a cascade of hormonal responses through to the body, which kind of creates this state. And that's usually structured linguistically. Then you have other parts of your brain that you can also activate through language and music and other sound modalities and light as well, but more specifically sound, that allows you to feel this expansive openness. And you can kind of turn those on when you get practice at it. You can kind of turn those on and off at will. And working with the idea of things that fire together, wire together, is just basically imagining a situation. So I've kind of come full circle in some ways back to some of the original things I was studying when I first got involved with this. But it's got such a depth of a framework beneath it now because of certainly the depth of Pi's studies is just like nothing I've ever seen before. It's so potent and rich in information. But to be able to feel things in this way of like if I start to activate this part of the brain and this part of the brain simultaneously, and those two things end up firing together, eventually that path will start to myelinate, and I'll start to link this feeling with this situation. I'll start to link the context of being able to open up and say, like, I'm going to... After one of the Vipassanas, I remember being able to experience depression and sadness in a completely different way. It was really powerful. It was like, I can just experience it. I don't have to fight it. I don't have to, usually there's some kind of conflict because it's like, I can't be depressed because other people won't like me or people are going to reject me. So there's some fear, there's some reason or unconscious.
Paradigm there,
yeah, like exactly like a paradigm of unconscious rejection of the state. But I remember just experiencing this intense sadness of heartbreak and just an intense feeling of love and beauty at the same time, like to be able to have both of those parts of the brain engaged that could experience awe and beauty and that incredible heartbreak at the same time was so powerful. Just to know that that was an experience that was available. Like it's not always that I can access it. Sometimes I fall back into like trying to avoid it, but just to know that that was available was such a powerful thing. And the more you start to practice the kind of the meta context and narratives with the deeper pains, the more you're actually able to explore the density of them and start to like spread out, read each word one bit at a time and kind of distort time, so you can start to integrate the information that's there. Because it's like anything that's painful, all right, the book page might have like 1,000 words on it, very small, very tightly pressed together, but there's so much it's so information rich.
Yeah.
Like pain is so information rich in that sense. But it just needs a context to be able to, and like connection to be able to hold and unpack and start to synthesize and integrate it.
Yeah. I think it's just so interesting. Like you can see that there's some trends that people tend to favor one, whether they're moving towards the pain or they're running from it and moving towards
Yeah,
pleasure, which can inhibit pain as well.
yeah, yeah.
And through innerdance or Kundalini activation, if people are coming through this loop, um, basically that co-activation of the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system at the same
Yes.
time was like a game changer for me, where we can sit with fear and safety, security at the same time. That came apart during the first time I held space for someone where they were feeling into deep grief that they haven't, like, they didn't talk about, they were holding it in, didn't share it with their family, but they said at the same time they felt just an overwhelming love as well. And it's the first time they've been able to experience grief and their pain with love. And I think this is what it's doing. It's like this modality is creating those ruptures, or it's coming back to the original conversation at the beginning. It's creating those ruptures, those neural ruptures in our network system, so we can completely have a different experience with this human existence. Because I don't know about you, but I know we're spiritual beings, but I actually enjoy being a human being as well.
Yeah.
And I want to fully be present, and I want to be able to hold it all instead of rejecting parts of me that are there, that have seen me, lead me down roads that I don't want to go on. Um, Instead, I kind of just want to be able to hold it all and experience it all, and because that's when you feel alive.
Yeah, it is. It's like it's saying yes to all life. Like it comes in these different waves, and there's always this tension and this interplay between intentionality and directionality. Of okay, I want to move this way and create this experience, and then kind of saying yes to everything that, dancing with everything that is presenting itself to you. I used to have an old teacher that said, if you want to know what your work is, it's like, just look at what's happening in your life. It's right there in front of you. You don't have to go searching for it. It's presenting itself right there. It's just paying attention to it. And
Yeah.
I think you can't really start to transform something unless you start to say yes to it and acknowledge it first. And then as you soften to it, it softens to you, and then you kind of integrate and expand into it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a dimension of you that you can utilize in some ways. Like coming back to the MMA example, it's like, I think there's times in the physical world, as like say, enjoying being a human being, where you need to be like physically tough to do physical things. Maybe right that I say that feels right for me. Maybe it's not the same for everybody, because I do also believe that if you take human beings as a kind of a macro representation of a human body, everybody on the planet has different roles to fulfill, and if they're able to tap into that internal guidance system,
Yeah.
it's like some people are like the eyeballs, and some people are the ears, and some people are the liver, and some people are the fingertips, and it's like everybody has different roles within the ecosystem of the planet, I feel like. So
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I've lost the track of what I'm trying to say here. We're talking about the physical, like the physical toughness, and
Yeah.
being physically capable, and having that to draw on as a capacity is,
Mm-hmm.
it's hugely. It's given me. It certainly gave me a lot of confidence. It's been really necessary for me to integrate that energy type in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I've certainly noticed where I've lacked it. And I trust that I felt the impulse to go to develop it, and now that I have developed it, there's some intelligence within that there'll be a time and a place to utilize it.
Yeah.
And I did find it gave me a lot of like physical presence in doing dance sessions as well, where yeah, it was powerful.
Yeah, I think this whole modality is just been like I've been practicing for maybe 15-ish months, so just over a year. So I'm still very new in this world, and what I've seen, like how it shaped my perception, and even with those structures collapsing in on each other, whether it's language, time, space, like I'm completely experiencing life in a different way.
Yeah,
Like where I would used to think time as being like a linear journey, I can actually see that I'm jumping on different timelines now, and it's almost
yeah,
moving in a different way in space, where I can see almost like I'm having all of these life journeys within this life in a sense. And yeah, it's so hard to explain. And I know a lot of what we do is, you were studying a science, like innerdance is a science of working with all of these systems that we
mm,
have in order to kind of open up ourselves up to the infinite. But for me, it's like spiritually, like it's just taken me into new dimensions that I could never have imagined before. And how would you, just because my girls are going to come home very soon, so we'll have to wrap up in a minute. But how would you describe inner dance? So I refer to it often as Kundalini activation, but it comes from the teachings of Pai Villaratha, our teacher that we
mm.
study with. So how would you conceptualize it if you had to? I know it's very, we don't like to limit this modality with words, but
I think actually you managed to do a good job of it earlier. You said something along the lines. It's the ability to feel fear without feeling afraid. So
yeah,
you're co-activating this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems at the same time, and you're kind of exploring your you're exploring the places that might otherwise scare you, but more so you're kind of giving um, you're letting go of the primacy of the default mode network, which is the sequence of this kind of network of brain parts that kind of structures your perception of time,
yeah,
and you're coming into more dream-like space, which is where there's more electricity in the brain,
yeah,
and you're allowing that self-organizing intelligence of the body to move things where it needs to move without the structure of your story telling it what to do, if that makes sense. So it's like the
mm,
relinquishing of the top-down control to start to get in touch more with the bottom-up control, and feeling safer and safer to be able to experience yourself as a being rather than live in the conceptual idea of yourself as a being. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and it's doing that through music and through touch and just through creating a space and holding an energy and really just channeling trust. It's like
yeah.
as
Feeling
a
safe.
practice, it's like, yeah, I can. There's a part of my brain that knows, or there's something deep within me that knows, that trusts life, that is resonant with trust and the process of life and all of that. And if I bring that to a session together as groups, or maybe individually, whatever, but together as groups, often there's a kind of a larger expression that starts to unfold through the bodies and through the minds, and that in turn starts to then build itself into a new perception, like a new psychological framework that can hold greater complexity and nuance and detail, and
Mm.
not get sucked into this kind of polarity and like binary survival thinking type stuff.
We don't have to be on that pendulum
No,
anymore. We can create that rupture. Is
Exactly.
that Vesica Pisces? We're coming back into the center.
Yeah, yeah. But we might kind of, you might, it's almost like you can go to one side and the other side, but then there's also a larger context of you that you can just see yourself doing that and you don't have to react or respond to it. Because often it's like, I feel myself going off to this side of the pendulum, so I want to try to push myself, but then you're just creating another pendulum, you're creating another
Yeah,
pole. So it's just, I think it's like learning to trust more than anything. Trust life, trust the body, and how
yeah,
learning that on an embodied level can actually start to let life unfold for you in a completely different way. Like the way you experience it just begins to change. The way life presents itself to you, the things that you notice, how things just start to become alive,
yeah,
rather than the conceptual world, which tends to flatten things into like a box or a concept or a judgment, um, and objectifies things, and I think we've lived for a long time in the pendulum has been in the objective realm and the empirical realm, which might, maybe with good reason, as a counterbalance to religious mysticism, which was obviously going off the
yeah,
rails
yeah,
in certain places. But then it became very empirical, and like the scientific inquiry, and like developing that dimension of being as well. And I think when you look at these processes across time, there is a trajectory that you can track in the same way that you can track human development as well. So
yeah,
there's a context for it all, and you don't need to push against it, um, out of maybe a place of fear. You can
yeah.
move and push if you want, but it just feels like there's an increase in the sense of love and trust, um, in what you're doing and how you kind of walk with that every day. You know.
Mhm. That's perfect. I couldn't have said it better. So I know there's going to be so many people. I feel like we need a part two. I
Okay.
knew
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
knew we would have. We can maybe come on and do something more practical the next time. But you do have an amazing offering that you've just started, which
Yeah.
I'm attending online on a Friday. Because there might be some people that do want to kind of work with you in this sort of multidiscipline approach. So how can they find you?
Well, I have my Instagram, obviously.
Hmm.
I've just started kind of revving up on that a little bit. I have Substack where I write stuff. I have YouTube where I make videos, but you would find all of that through the website, perceptionarchitecture.com. And the Friday thing is 1 p.m. GMT, 2 p.m. Central European time in Spain at the moment. But it's basically like a get together where we establish an emergent theme and then work through it as a kind of a group coaching type thing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's a mix of different modalities, working together: body, brain, breath, music, all kinds of things. But yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's just nice to have a space on a Friday. I really enjoyed it, so I'm coming back again this week.
Yeah.
I'm making space. Every Friday, I'm having my neural reset with you.
Just a chance to like connect and be okay.
Yeah, get ready for the weekend before my
Yeah,
kids
yeah,
come
yeah.
home from
Right,
school.
right. Shake off the week.
That's it. So I will put all the links and things. I will share everything. So if you do want to find Tom, you know where he is and how to sign up on a Friday. And it's donations based as well. And I know you're donating 50% of it
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
This was like to trees and seas because I'm like big on breath work, and trees are good for breathing. Like we need them. So
We do.
it was just an thing of I wanted to like channel money through and send bits off to these different causes that I believe in. So one of them is the Ocean Cleanup Project. The other one is Tree Nation, where they're like planting forests around the world, and then the other one that I was looking at was Paul Rosalie's foundation, who's doing kind of Amazon,
Oh,
restoration
wow.
work and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah, it's good causes.
Yeah.
So it's good to funnel it all through.
Yeah. So everyone who's attending, we're all circulating that light.
Exactly.
So we're all going to benefit
Circle
from it.
back
It's
around.
coming back. Right.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Tom, for this chat. I feel like we could talk all day. So we will come
Yeah.
back for a part two sometime.
Amazing.
Well,
Well,
that's considered.
thanks so much, Megs. It was really nice to talk to you, and it's
Yeah,
been good to work together over the last year.
I know. I know. I feel like we've been had our heads in the books for the last year. We've been studying a lot, so it's nice to hear more about you.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I will see you on Friday, and anyone else who's joining, I will see you on Friday at Tom's Space.
Wonderful. Thanks,
Right.
Megs. Have a good
Thank you
one.
everyone for joining. Thanks for the lovely comments too, and we'll see you soon. Bye.